everybody, Ellie here for WhoCulture, and the time has come to find some Easter eggs for episode 3 of season 2 of Doctor Who The Well. Let's just get into them, shall we? So, number 20. Another week, another costume changing scene. Now, last week we discussed how the way these scenes are shot is a direct lift from a similar scene in last season's The Devil's Cord. And the same is true again here with this scene as well. But there is a bonus Easter egg this time as well, because we have the Britney Spears song Toxic. Now, this track has appeared in Russell T Davies's Doctor Who before. It was first used in the 2005 episode The End of the World, which is set on a space station in the far future. Now, Lady Cassandra played it from her iPod, or more accurately her jukebox, and claimed that it was a traditional ballad from planet Earth. Now, what's extra fun about this callback is that the same model of Cassandra's jukebox also appears in the 15th Doctor's TARDIS. And in the January 2024 edition of Doctor Who magazine, it was also confirmed that 15's jukebox featured Tainted Love by Soft Cell, which is yet another track that plays on Cassandra's jukebox in The End of the World. So could they be the same jukebox? Or could they just have similar track lists? Or maybe the TARDIS simply remembered the songs and the style from Cassandra's jukebox and then copied them over when it reconstructed the console room for the 15th Doctor. Either way, don't be surprised if we hear more traditional Earth ballads in another season 2 episode. Just saying. Number 19. As with last week's episode, there's a bunch of musical callbacks in The Well, which is not really surprising considering its major links to a past episode. But one of the more subtle can be heard as the Doctor and Belinda fall from the spaceship at the start of the episode. So as they land on the surface of the planet, there are a few quiet notes of Murray Gold's track, The Doctor's Theme, played on the piano. Now, this track served as the Doctor's primary musical motif, mainly between 2005 and 2010, but it has also appeared a few times since then as well. Now, its use here has a double meaning. I mean, as the Doctor's theme throughout modern Who, it does make sense that it would play for the 15th Doctor as well. But since this theme is primarily associated with the 9th and 10th Doctors, I would say its use here could be looked at as a subtle hint to the Well's connection with a 10th Doctor episode. Number 18. They actually did it! And no, I'm not talking about making a Midnight sequel. I am talking about finally putting the 15th Doctor in a quarry. Now, this may sound like a bit of an odd Easter egg, but quarries are weirdly intrinsically tied to the identity of Doctor Who, going all the way back through the classic series. Now, whether you're talking about The Hand of Fear, or The Waters of Mars, or the dozens of other stories that filmed in quarries, it's kind of a running joke that so many alien planets seem to look like quarries. And it's almost a rite of passage for a Doctor to get their first one. So now, Ncuti can finally check quarries off of his list. This particular quarry is Pant Quarry in Bridgend, Wales, which was most recently seen in Jodie Whittaker's final story, The Power of the Doctor. Number 17. Quarries and music aren't the only returnees this week. We also get another use of the psychic paper. First introduced in Series 1 of the 2005 revival, the psychic paper is basically magic ID. When shown to a person, it shows them whatever the Doctor wishes them to see. In this case, that the Doctor is of a higher rank than the squadron leader. 15 has used the psychic paper before in episodes like The Church on Ruby Road and Rogue, and it's been used by every other revival Doctor as well. Never been used in front of Belinda though, which is probably why she looks a little bit confused by this. Number 16. So after the Doctor uses the psychic paper and gains the trust of platoon leader Shia Castellian, she explains to him why they can't return to the ship right away, which is largely because the planet's atmosphere is charged with galvanic radiation. Now, if that rang a bell somewhere in the back of your brain, that's because galvanic radiation and galvanic energy has been mentioned in Doctor Who before. Now, it was of course mentioned in the original Midnight episode as a feature of the planet Midnight, so those who noticed its mention mention here might have started to put two and two together about where the well actually takes place. But much more easy to forget is the galvanic beam in the Giggle. You know, that enormous gun perched on top of Unit Tower that was commandeered by the toy maker and then used to kill the 14th Doctor, who then of course bi-generated into the 15th Doctor. It's an interesting link between the Gatwa and Tennant Doctors. Galvanic energy created the 15th Doctor, but it's also a feature of the planet that terrifies the 10th and 15th Doctors the most. Number 15. So the Doctor, Belinda and the squadron enter the base and discover that everyone is dead and the whole place is a mess. The design of this base is reminiscent of other modern base under siege stories like The Impossible Planet and the Satan Pit and Under the Lake Before the Flood. But what you probably didn't realise is that it actually has more in common with the recent 15th Doctor episode Joy to the World. And that is because certain parts of the Time Hotel set were straight up recycled for use in the well. Now the most obvious parts are the circular doors of the Time Hotel rooms and the mining base's bedrooms. But a lot more sneaky are these giant metal supports inside the base's main room, which also served as supports inside the Time Hotel lobby. Now we often joke about Doctor Who constantly reusing the same locations and sets, but credit where credit's due because it's a great way to both cut down on waste and keep the production more efficient. Number 14. As everyone explores the base and realises that there aren't any signs of life, Belinda questions what the plan is if they don't find anyone alive. To which Cassio coldly replies, "Nuke this site from orbit." Now this echoes a famous line spoken by Sigourney Weaver's Ripley in the 1986 movie Aliens, where she suggests that nuking the site from orbit is the only way to be sure that the xenomorph threat has been neutralized. And speaking of the Alien franchise, Shire's sacrifice at the end of the well, very similar to the way Ripley threw herself into a vat of lava in Alien 3. So maybe the team had Alien on their mind while making this episode. Maybe. Number 13. Throughout the base you can see a logo of the letter G dotted on various surfaces, and this represents the Gestetta Mining Company, the company that presumably ran this base and oversaw the mining operation around the well. Now what's funny about its logo is that it may actually be a nod to another popular BBC One Saturday night show, namely Gladiators. Just take a look at the logo for Gladiators and then take a look at the logo for Gestetta Mining Company, and you can see that they are practically identical. Tell me they're not identical. Now of course this could merely be a coincidence, or there could be a massive fan of Gladiators working on the Doctor Who art department. And let's not forget that there was a Doctor Who Gladiators crossover during the marketing for this season. Number 12. We arrive in the room where most of the episode is set, and we meet Alice Fenley, played by this week's Arch Runner-up, Rose Ayling-Ellis. Now, after Alice tells the troopers her name, her and the Doctor have a silent conversation in British Sign Language, which Shire tells them not to do. Now, it's a moment that further leans into the themes of paranoia and distrust within the episode. And though you might have expected the conversation to be subtitled for us viewers who don't know sign language, it actually wasn't. So, what are they saying? Well, I reached out to a friend of the channel, Peter Langton, who is very familiar with BSL. And this is what he told me the translation of the conversation is. So the Doctor says, "Calm down, don't be scared," to which Alice responds, "They all have guns." The Doctor says, "Have I?" "No, trust me." And Alice says, "Thank you." And I would like to say a big thank you to Peter for helping me work all of this out. Number 11, and speaking of the BSL seen throughout this episode, the Doctor does have something of a history with BSL. It was first used in the Series 9 story Under the Lake and Before the Flood, which weirdly enough was also set in a dark and dingy mining base. Cass, who was second in command of the base, was deaf and she communicated via BSL. Now the 12th Doctor initially says that he can speak BSL, but then he immediately realises that he's forgotten how. But clearly sometime between the 12th and 15th incarnations, he's got some practice in. And it's actually nice to think that his inability to communicate with Cass made him want to learn BSL in case he needed it in the future. Number 10. Belinda offers to patch up Alice's arm and Mo gives her a basic med kit. And Belinda doesn't really recognise any of the stuff within that kit, except for Simulin. Now the reason she knows what Simulin is because it was also used back on Miss Belinda Chandra 1 in the IV bags in the underground base. Number 9. So the Doctor, Cassio, and Shire head to Central Control. And just like the Quarry earlier in the episode, this is another location that may be familiar to long-time viewers. So along with the earlier shot of the squadron arriving outside the base, these scenes at Central Control were filmed at Liberty Steel in Wales, which is something of an old favourite when it comes to Doctor Who filming locations. Formerly known as Maya Steel and Alpha Steel, this location was used in episodes like Planet of the Dead, where it doubled as the Tritivore ship interior, and A Christmas Carol, where it served as the cold metal streets of Sardic Town. 3 things are inevitable in Doctor Who: Daleks, quarries, and steelworks. Number 8. So we're still in Central Control, and here we learn a bit more about Shire and her backstory. Now, she tells the Doctor that she was brought up in the Wildlands. So this could just be a general description of an area of a planet. But we have heard of a place called the Wildlands before in the Series 3 episode Utopia. Here, Professor Yana tells the 10th Doctor that the message calling them to Utopia came from far beyond the Condorcet Wilderness, out towards the Wildlands and the dark matter reefs. Now, Utopia is set way further in the future than the Well, but it's not inconceivable that a place called the Wildlands would still be around at that point in the future. Number 7. As Shire is telling the Doctor the history of the planet they're on, we get more early clues about the imminent surprise midnight twist. So she tells him that all the galvanic radiation came from the planet's sun, which has since collapsed and is now known as a grey star. But before it collapsed, it was known as an extonic star. The only other time extonic stars have been mentioned in Doctor Who is, that's right, in Midnight, where we learn that the planet is turning around an extonic star. Professor Hobbs reveals that the extonic rays that come from the star are essentially raw galvanic radiation. So in other words, stay off the surface of the planet or you'll be melted into a pile of goop. Those who didn't pick up on the midnight twist at this stage would surely have done so at the mention of diamonds a few seconds later, as the only time we've seen midnight, its surface was completely covered in diamonds. Number 6. The Doctor is horrified to discover that he is on midnight and wastes no time in sprinting back to the main room to check on Alice, Belinda, and the rest of the crew. And on his way, he runs past a box on the floor that has some very recognisable markings on it, for those who might remember Wild Blue Yonder. That is the same language seen throughout that episode on the alien spaceship, and was designed to look this way as the captain was horse-like, and so the crew thought that maybe a horse's hooves could make these scratches and circular symbols. I'm not sure that there's any relevance to this beyond it being a piece of reused set dressing, or maybe it was sneakily placed here to make us think that the not things were the villains of this episode. Who knows? Honestly, who knows? Number 5. Speaking of the midnight twist scene, this is where we arrive at the next major musical callback in this episode. To further immerse us back into the fear of midnight and the fear of the midnight entity, we have the return of Murray Gold's theme for that episode, which is on the Series 4 soundtrack and is titled simply Midnight. Now, unlike the rather random choice of using a Series 5 track in Lux, the return of this theme was entirely fitting for this episode. The familiarity of it helps the audience to remember the terror of the previous story, but it also has such a fast-paced, erratic tempo and tone that even without any recognition, it still puts you on the edge of your seat. Either way, I'm just super pumped to be hearing some of my favourite tracks making a comeback in 2025. Number 4. Now, I had to talk about this one because it gives me an opportunity to mention River Song, the best character. The Doctor is talking to the entity, and while we don't know exactly what it said to him, the Doctor does reveal that it knows his name. Now, assuming that this means the Doctor's true name rather than just the Doctor, this makes the Midnight entity one of only a few beings to know that information. River Song is, of course, one of those, as we learned in her very first story when she whispers it to the 10th Doctor. I assume that the Time Lords probably know his name too, because they wanted him to say it in the time of the Doctor so that they know that they had the right universe to come to. Now, also remember that in the original Midnight, the entity completely possessed the Doctor. So it was likely at this point that it was able to learn more about him and then use that information to taunt him 400,000 years later. Number 3, as Shia sends 2 of her troopers into the airlock to get Alice to safety, there's a rather chilling and very deliberate detail shown in the next shot. So as the camera pans over to the info panel next to the airlock, you can see that it clearly displays 4 people inside the airlock, even though only 3 people went into it. So did the entity ever actually leave Alice's back? Is it on one of the other troops? Did it duplicate itself, or was there more than one of them? Or is this a production mistake? Honestly, I doubt it, considering how prominently and deliberately this shot is displayed. So it more than likely means that there's something inside the elevator along with these 3 people. Now, along with the cliffhanger, it's another clue that suggests there might be more to come from the Midnight entity in the future. Either that, or Russell T Davies simply wanted to play into those themes of paranoia a bit more and have us questioning what exactly happened to the entity. Now, for an episode all about paranoia, it's very clever to instill that feeling in your audience as well, so well done. Number 2, it's the moment you've all been waiting for, folks. It is time for this week's Flood Watch, Flood Watch, Flood Watch. So here she's playing the leader of the squadron, presumably squadron leader Chinchappa, who was mentioned at the start of the episode. Now she asks Mo if the Doctor was using a Vindicator, before ominously declaring, "That's exactly what I needed to know." Now obviously the big new detail we learn here is that Mrs. Flood has knowledge of the Vindicator, and seems to be quite interested in it. Now if we assume that Vindicators are some sort of Time Lord / Gallifreyan technology, then this could be a major clue that Mrs. Flood is someone very close to home for the Doctor. Literally. Now it's also interesting that she calls it a Vindicator, because in Lux, the Doctor seemed to make that name up on the spot. So then how does Mrs. Flood know about it? Has she somehow got eyes and ears in the TARDIS? Did she get that word from the Doctor maybe in the future? Or is Mrs. Flood a fellow Time Lord, and possibly Vindicated essentially is a Gallifreyan slang term? It seems we're going to get a key piece of information each week, so perhaps by the end of Lucky Day, which is the midpoint of the season, maybe we'll be able to paint a clearer picture of who Mrs. Flood is and what the hell she's up to. Number 1. Now it's not often that there's an Easter egg in the episode's credits, but this week there is. So first of all, we should mention this rather spooky detail just before the credits roll. There's been a lot of conversation about whether the Midnight entity is indeed attached to Mo's back in the cliffhanger, or whether it's just residual paranoia. But if you listen closely, right as the episode cuts to black, you can hear something whispering. The same whispering the entity does throughout the episode. A detail intended to add one final scare, or confirmation that Mo is the entity's new host. I mean, let me know what you think in the comments down below. What does it mean? And then, as for the credits themselves, you might have noticed that the actor who played the entity, Paul Casey, is credited as It Has No Name. It's nice to see that even the end credits are keeping up with the mystery and the illusion surrounding the entity. Could you imagine if they'd given it a name in the credits and just spoilt the whole thing? And now it is time for the quickfire eggies, which are basically extra little details that we either weren't 100% sure were proper Easter eggs, or were just cool things that we noticed. Now we have no orange spacesuits this time, but we do have very similar looking helmets. See that helmet that Alice is wearing there? That looks very familiar, doesn't it? We have Shia's motto at the beginning of the episode, "Hope is irrelevant." How very Borg of you. It's a very Borg thing to say, and we know that Russell T Davies does like his Star Trek references, don't we? Now, the well itself definitely threw those Midnight theories off for a moment, and maybe started to look like this might actually be an episode connected to the Impossible Planet and the Satan Pit, because that pit, that well, looked very similar to the pit in the Satan Pit. Now, Alice says that the creature came out of the well laughing, and we've all been thinking it. Does this mean it came out with that very recognizable laughing sound of the giggle? Is this creature going to turn out to be a member of the Pantheon? Who knows? Another thing I loved was that we got the return of a good old-fashioned running down a corridor scene. Running down corridors. And then we have a weird coincidence. Season 1, Episode 3, boom. The companion gets shot. Season 2, Episode 3, The Well. The companion gets shot. Russell, stop shooting your companions in the 3rd episode, please! Make sure that you go back and check out our Ups and Downs review for this episode, our discussion for this episode. We have an extra bonus video about this episode out this week as well, so go and check all of those out. And stay tuned for all the content covering Lucky Day next week. In the meantime, I've been Ellie for WhoCulture, and in the words of River Song herself, goodbye, sweeties.